Three, two, one. Hello, Tess. How are you doing today? You well?
I'm good, thanks for the countdown.
You
Yeah, I'm
enjoyed?
good. It's like the hottest day of the, I mean, is it the hottest day of the, I don't even know, but it's fucking hot today. And my house is an oven. And I've spent the entire morning, as I was saying to Elias, packing up my entire bedroom because I'm making this transitional shift out of my flat in London to Germany for the whole summer.
And what is so exciting in Germany? Tell us about this eco farm.
So I'm going to spend 3 months on an eco farm that actually belongs to my boyfriend, but there is a lot of other things going on there. So it's kind of a farm, but there's also all sorts of kind of projects. He's more, I guess, a land use entrepreneur than a farmer, I think he'd probably want me to say. Um, so I'm going to go and get involved in some things there. I have hopefully I'm meant to actually have a module for my master's in neuroscience starting at the end of this month, but I'm seeing if I can delay it to the end of the summer. Basically, I want to take the summer off studying and cultivate some hobbies.
What's it been like jumping back into academia?
So I've been out of academia maybe for six, no, that's a lie. I mean, we're kissing 10 years now. And initially it's just a different process. It's a different way of like learning things. And because everything with my course is, I mean, primarily it's online, even though it's a master's at King's, which is a London uni, it's hugely different from my undergraduate experience. So I don't know, like you have to self-motivate, but I think for me it's given me a really clear focus on something to do. Like when you're running your own business or working for yourself, there's many different things spinning in the air and a lot of uncertainty all the time. But when you're studying, it's like the routine, it's just about this one thing, and I really like that.
And what is it? Neuroscience and
Psychology.
okay. And what made you want to choose that?
Probably, so basically my mum's family all have very interesting relationship with mental health, or all have very interesting minds, I could put that more diplomatically.
I
And
can
I
vouch.
think huh
I can vouch for that.
yeah. And so in 2018, when I was still working in food, I had a kind of, I guess you'd maybe call it a breakdown, but it was more a breakthrough in a sense, where I realized that the kind of lifestyle that I was living and the way that I was going about my business was just making me really unhappy. And I decided I needed a change. And I wanted to learn about something that would be super beneficial for other people, and would ultimately feed into an aspect of food also, because gut health is intricately linked with mental health. And there's so much emphasis on what we eat and food being good for the body, the liver, the digestion, not being overweight, the insulin, all this stuff, but very little to do with mental health. So I wanted to study that, I guess, with the entry point from food. Yeah.
Right. Um, I think your mum's super amazing. She's got loads of really interesting like things to say. And funnily enough, Dash sent me a video of some guru talking the other day that I think your mum had passed on, that was quite interesting. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about how you've been, like, what you've been doing for self-care during this pandemic, because obviously, it's all about physical health, the virus, right? But I think there's clearly been a big burden on a lot of people's mental health through this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say it's been a burden. I think it can go one of two ways. But everybody that I've had direct communication with, friends, colleagues, people I've worked with, have actually found kind of the opposite, that the slowing of this pace and the reassessing of certain parts of their life and the kind of stripping back of a lot of the shoulds and the background noise and the feelings of obligation to go see this person, or feeling caught up in like the buzz of being in the city and like commuting and stuff, has actually made them I guess in a sense happier, because once you get used to a slower pace, there's kind of like an intrinsic relaxation, I personally feel, that can come with that. I think obviously it's different depending on like your housing circumstances and how many people you're living with and what the dynamic is there. But yeah, I've only had positive experiences with it so far.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. So basically, we should just have a pandemic forever, basically, shouldn't we?
Kind of. I mean, it's funny because we were talking just before we started recording about living, and at the moment, like I was saying, I'm cleaning out my room for my brother to utilize my flat. Um, let's see how that goes. And I don't think I would have considered moving to the countryside, let alone another countryside than my own country. If I hadn't gone through this, or at least been ready for that kind of shift. Like, I think more than anything, I understand much more about what is good for me rather than what I like. Because what you like isn't necessarily what's best for you. And don't get me wrong, like I really like the countryside a lot, but it's good for me as much as I like it, if that makes sense. It's not kind of there's a kind of uh, a full body relaxation that I just don't get in London.
I completely can hear where you're coming from. Do you
Because
think? Do you think?
you've been in Oxford this time, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that makes a difference? You know, if you're used to more of a countryside setting, I know Oxford's like a city and it's also got countryside. Do you think that makes a difference to how you view where you want to live in the future, kind of thing?
Maybe. I mean, obviously, for me personally, I feel like at the last couple of years I've been in a transition. I think maybe we always are in transition as humans, but much more noticeably over the last couple of years, I've really felt an extraordinary shift in my desire for the future and my um, lifestyle. And this kind of relates to my work, to my way of living, to my habits, to the friendships I have held on to. And I think obviously it's different for everybody, but there is humans are constantly questioning kind of what's the meaning of this all and the purpose, and ultimately we don't find an answer for that. But there must, for me in a sense, I always have wanted to do something that is meaningful in whatever way, of like sustainability or living more mindfully. And there's a lot of aspects of this is quite hard in London.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, Another thing that I think's really interesting to kind of delve into is, obviously we touched on mental health a little bit, but what I think's been really interesting with this whole pandemic response is that, like, I don't know how you feel, but do you think there's been enough kind of emphasis on like nutrition and health during this thing, as opposed to, like, you know, early on it was like wash your hands, wear a mask, and there wasn't much about like get your vitamins in, eat your greens, and take a break from alcohol and stuff like that, right?
I think everyone, I mean, wine, I think tripled, and oh no, it was up in hundreds times greater sales. Like wine merchants, you know, wine was just fucking raking it in. Um, I think it's a really hard thing to guide a population that are resistant to wearing masks in supermarkets into looking after their health. Ultimately, food, and this is something I've always stressed, especially when I worked in food is intricately connected into identity. So to challenge and change someone's way of eating, it's ultimately changing their belief system, their way of going about their day, their the backbones of the way that they live. Probably as much so as religion, because you do it 3 times a day, probably 4 or 5 if you're English and you snack, like me. And I think that it's a really hard push, because obviously when it comes to companies making money, the thing that has the biggest turnover is products that would have a long shelf life and are made primarily of cheap products like sugar. So it's tough, like emphasizing what people need to do in order to make their immune system stronger. Like I have some friends who are so educated, I say friends loosely because what I'm actually referring to is a lot of men in my life who drink a lot and have great health, that are in their 30s and are fine, but also have things like hay fever or allergic reactions on their skin, sometimes under the, that kind of thing. And these will be intricately related to sugar and dairy products, and drinking things with histamines like beer, which can affect hay fever. A lot of these things have an indirect relationship with our immune system and the way that we deal with certain obstacles or bacteria or viruses or whatever we incur. And I think that people taking responsibility for their health is one of the hardest things. It's a really, really hard thing.
100%. I mean, like, it's in, like, me and my brother sort of decided to kind of go vegan a couple years ago, and it's amazing how
Yes, yeah.
if you mention that to certain people, it's almost like you're telling them you're part of a religion, and they get that defensive response.
Yeah.
What,
I
what
mean, I can understand. Like, I went vegetarian for 2 years, and over the last few months, I've actually broken it, eating wild boar and various things that have been like shot in. I mean, whatever. Like, it's still eating meat, but like it's not from a supermarket. It's slightly different. But I do believe that it's a better way of living, and I think it aligns much more with my belief systems and ways of wanting to kind of be in the world. But I don't think that it necessarily has to define anything more than a personal choice of what to put in your mouth. It's really as simple as that when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. And has there been any kind of, like, since you've dived into the world of kind of like diet and nutrition, in terms of that kind of religious standoff, if that's something that you've kind of had to get used to encountering?
I think that there's been certain zeitgeists around food, like there is with anything, fashion, homeware, whatever. Like it comes under like a lifestyle thing, and I think beyond the kind of the everyday in the industry, the ingredients like kale have had their heyday, and then avocados, and then gluten-free, like there have been waves of things that have kind of come to the public's attention so much more. And I don't know if veganism is a phase, and I think it's not, because it's a very much more it is a lifestyle decision, but ultimately it's just food. um I think, like, it's basically veganism is what vegetarianism was 20 years ago.
Right.
People would be like, "You're what? I don't even know what that is." And eventually, outside of the cities and provincial Hertfordshire and Cornwall, they'll eventually kind of embrace this. But for now, it's still very much a more city-centric thing.
Mm. Is there a diet that you like prescribe to or stick to, or have you tried different? Are there
Oh,
different ones?
fuck. I mean, what a question. I mean, there's many things. I mean, I used to be so much more aware of what I was putting into my mouth on a daily basis. Like, if I was having kind of porridge in the morning, I'd try and make sure I had like vegetables at lunch. But then if I had like a smoothie in the morning, I'd have like some like, do you know what I mean? I'd try and like balance out various different things. Whereas now I'm just a bit more, and I probably should be a bit more aware, because obviously it does tie into like nutrition content and your digestion. And sometimes I'm like, why have I got this? Why can't I go? Why am I blocked? Or like, why am I so gassy, or whatever it is? And it's because I've kind of thoughtlessly eaten, but this is part of, I think, like life. But I guess it's a phase thing with me. It has been a phase thing with me. I'm so much more relaxed than ever I was before about food. I really enjoy it. So I think that will always affect and influence me first. Yeah.
How important is it to account, because obviously these debates do get so heated, how important is it to account for like different people have different bodies, therefore what's best for them to eat varies, right?
I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I'm going to ask you actually after, because it's quite interesting. But um, everybody has got different types of bodies, but really the backbone of what we need is similar, which is that mostly we need to be eating plants because we get the highest amount of nutrition from them, which is still like a quarter of the nutrition that it used to be, 75 years ago, from soil quality being so low. Um, but beyond that, like the decision to eat meat or eat dairy or to eat more grain products or whatever is ultimately dependent on the body, dependent on the size of the person, dependent on many things. But a lot of people aren't really very in tune with their body and its needs. Like, we'll go all day, have a coffee for breakfast, maybe like a sandwich for lunch, and then a bowl of pasta for dinner, but a big bowl of pasta for dinner, so much so that it's a heavy, dense amount for the intestines and you just fall asleep. That's not optimizing your gut health, and it'll cause inflammation. You're not getting the nutrition you need. Like, there's many different things to consider, which is ultimately to be kind to your body. Don't give it too much, don't overwhelm it, don't deprive it too much, but then at the same time, fasting is quite good sometimes because it actually makes your brain work better. It makes all of your cells more efficient. Like, there's a lot. I mean, I'm not, you'd have to kind of read about this from an expert, but there is a lot of, why have the yogis done it for so many thousands of years? It has some amazing effects on the body.
What have the yogis done specifically?
Fasting. Well,
Oh,
fasting is
fasting,
kind
right.
of, yeah, fasting is kind of intricately kind of linked into meditation practice, and there's this connection to a higher state of awareness in the self. And it's true, like if you think about the times where you're super hungry, it's very different obviously because you're not kind of set up for this. But when the body is very hungry, there is a kind of point where that just kind of alleviates, and it just is able to efficiently just do what it needs to do. But people don't really allow themselves to kind of get into that stage, and if they're hungry, it's considered to be a bad thing. But actually the body is very clever and efficient, and since overeating is such a prominent thing, it's kind of the this is the direction that people could be steered into a bit more, maybe. I don't know, like I'm not an expert on this particularly, but I've started to kind of read a bit about it, and as someone who loves food, it's quite an impossible task to think about missing a meal. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've definitely felt like there are times when I'm like hungry and I don't eat. I feel more productive. It's almost like
Yeah,
a coffee high. It's almost like that kind of, I don't know what that is. It's really interesting that your body,
your
you're
body
more
usually,
switched on.
yeah, sorry I interrupted, but yeah, I agree. I think it does make a difference. And then you eat lunch and then you're like, oh, I need a nap now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And unfortunately, I have not resisted coffee. I've been trying, but what about you? How's your relationship with coffee at the moment?
I mean, I'm a full-on addict, whatever you want to construe from that. Like, I drink it every day, several a day. Today I had 3. I don't want to ever go over 3, but at the moment I'm kind of in an interesting kind of process of, like, I guess I'm not drinking so for the next couple of months, and I was about to say I'm not eating sugar, but I just ate some chocolate. But like, if I eat chocolate, it'll be like a bit, like like a bit of chocolate, not like lots. So I'm really limiting things like this because it does really affect the brain, and I'm trying to look after my mental health for more chemical reasons.
How has things like yoga and meditation helped you, if at all?
So I used to be much better at doing yoga, but meditation is always something I haven't quite gotten into, because when I meditate, and I know it's meant to be accessing a higher part of your mind, and I always fall asleep. Like, I just can't help it. Like, I just fall asleep. My brain is very good at saying, okay, bye. And a lot of my restoration, a lot of my calming, whatever it is, happens when I'm asleep. Like, it's not the same, and there are parts that you're missing, because it's kind of connecting to, I mean, you have to ask a meditation expert about this, but yeah, I'm not great with meditation. With yoga, I love it, and I've been doing yoga for 10 years, maybe. Yeah, 10 years. And it's sporadic. I don't do it every day, but I always interweave yoga movements in whatever else I'm doing. So I do Pilates quite a lot, but I do it with leg weights. So it actually works, like, as in, you sweat a lot. And then I also go for a run every now and then, and I have a trampoline. So it's a combination for me of meditation, yoga, and other exercises that I find particularly work. But you can, and this happens easily if you just overstimulate yourself with caffeine and running and constant movement. Your body will develop stress, not even from the mind, but just in the muscles and yeah. So you have to be, it's about the balance.
Balance. It's all about balance.
You're
Yeah.
saying you're doing tennis today, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tennis today.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I beat your brother. I'm sure he'll stay quiet. To be fair, we were both off form. But yeah, no, I think there's probably something quite meditative about yoga and running and stuff. So I don't think, it's difficult, because sitting down and just being quiet, yeah, it can cause people to fall asleep. And yeah, I think there's a variety of ways that people can access that peace. For me, it's meditation has been pretty helpful in a lot of ways. And sometimes it's not even about clearing my mind. It's actually just about almost just listening to my thoughts to know what's in my mind. Because, half the time your mind's just racing and you don't even know what you're thinking about, right? It's just, I don't know.
I'm a therapist for that. So, I mean, I would agree with you. I think meditation is very useful for exactly that. But it's interesting. So, like, for me to chart my experience and where I was at mentally before I left to go to Germany for those 2 months I was there, before now. So we're late June. I was there kind of all of May, most of June. And to think about, I would never be able to kind of notice that transition on my own. But yet, by speaking to her every single week, discussing progress with my course, discussing where I'm at in terms of my, the adjustment to being in the countryside all the time, not being with my dog, many other things, working with new people or whatever. I noticed so much more about the way that I was responding to my environment through that. Because otherwise, when your thoughts are in your head on your own, you don't have that person to kind of soundboard everything. They remind you, and you can hear the tone of your voice. And as you say the things that are in your mind and your concerns and whatever it is, you're noticing them because you're acknowledging them out loud. So there's something I find quite good about that, even if people use their phone or their voice notes as a therapist, sometimes saying something out loud, and the acknowledgement of that saying is super powerful.
Definitely. That's an interesting point. Obviously you've had a very interesting life. You're very entrepreneurial, and there's obviously massive pressures that come with that. How much, not to dive deep into gender politics, but how much have you found, what aspects of being a woman in the circles and stuff you've moved have produced extra pressures for you in like entrepreneurial spaces?
I it's a funny thing because I always, I think that there's no difference between the opportunities presented to men and women unless you differentiate between them. Like, I've never gone into a situation thinking I am a woman, therefore I am more vulnerable, or I'm more susceptible to encountering prejudice, or I'm less likely to get what I, want to achieve and getting to that level. I think that, but then I treat everyone in my immediate environment and every situation as if it's the same. Like, I don't see the difference in encountering a woman or a man. But then at the same time, what's been interesting over the last few weeks, what's been, with what's been going on globally, with a lot of other, I would say minorities, but not minorities, like majorities of people expressing, dismay about the way that prejudice and preferences and whatever priorities for certain people have occurred over generations, has made me really think about actually how much I benefited from being an attractive white female in the working space that I was in terms of the ability to use intelligence or elocution to communicate with people in a way that's clear, that I wouldn't otherwise have been able to if I hadn't been from the background I have. So, and then, and if I mean, to answer it more concisely, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for being fortunate enough to have parents who are loving, who prioritize education first, who taught me to work hard, and who taught me to, explore all of the different avenues of a career that I thought I wanted to go into. And if this didn't work, try another thing. Because without the support of your immediate environment, no person is an island, and everybody needs the right kind of guidance and to feel valued in whatever they're doing, I think. So I guess for me, I feel very fortunate.
That's really interesting to hear. And it's also interesting, I think, probably you're unique in the sense that maybe you don't feel as much as a victim mentality from being a woman, in the same way that I know, for example, there are Black people who don't like the label of being a victim, and think that sometimes that's harmful. But it's also really interesting to hear you, just kind of acknowledge some of the privileges as well, because I know I think that's quite it's an underratedly difficult thing to do, actually, when you're just.
I appreciate privilege. I think you can be unaware of it until suddenly I'm not really someone to sit and complain. Like, I'm grateful every day. I'm grateful for having legs that work. I'm grateful for having a lovely flat. I'm grateful for my supportive family. As I get older, I've become more like this. I wasn't always, but I think there are, as you kind of encounter day-to-day life and other people, and it's insane that people are so blinkered in their view. And I think, yes, in any sort of situation, you can become a victim. You could be the most fortunate person in the world and be a victim. But the thing is that it's what you do with what you've got and what you can take from the situation and generate that into a positive thing that is ultimately what will help things progress. And I'm talking about, I don't know, like, I think what's been going on with Black Lives Matter is something that I feel so kind of disconnected from, but I'm so kind of connected to, because, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and we were talking about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be, to have only had the vote for 100 years at the same time, kind of as when the American Civil War was going on. It was, all kind of similar times. And the progress that's been made with women over the last 100 years has been vast. Now we're just arguing over equal pay gaps, whereas we're still dealing with extraordinary disparity between race and all over the world. And I guess what I constantly think especially studying neuroscience, is that we all think we're more sophisticated than other species, but we have monkey brains. We really do. And the reason people have such issues with identity, and the reason people are, what's the word, dispassionate with people that are from different cultures, is because not only are they taught that they are other than, but also there's a natural sense within humans to be fearful of that which they do not know. And it's a case of, like, if we think many, many generations back to when the world was less interconnected, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have all of these different technology mediums in order to fly all over the world and go to new places. You'd stay within, 100 miles, a few 100 mile radius of where you were from. You'd never encounter somebody that looked so vastly different to you. And I think that same programming biologically is still within the brain, so that when people see something that's other and they've been told and programmed and conditioned, it's a combination of two different factors, to be fearful of or to be judgmental of. It comes from a place not of love, but obviously of fear. And fear is where people become destructive. And I think that I feel really sorry for the people that are blinded by that fear and are so judgmental on other cultures and the rest of the world, and make decisions based on that. But at the same time, I think if once we understand that it's not like hate doesn't just come from nowhere. Like it's layers of like insecurity, fear, other things as well that sit within that realm. And I think that kind of breaking down the boundaries of privilege and supremacy and many different kind of boundaries that restrict the kind of more natural flow of humans, ultimately as just one species sharing space and time on an earth that's all entropy. We kind of make the problems of each individual culture so vast. And I'm not saying they're not, because they really are. And what's happened through history is extraordinary and should be taught properly in schools. Like the American Civil War should be taught like the Nazi regime in Germany. There's no apology for what's happened before. Like there's no, this was a fucking massive fuck up. We need to teach our kids this so that we know this doesn't happen again. Like the Germans are like so aware of it. Like they grow up knowing that their grandparents are fucking cunts, and it's so different. And I think that understanding why this happened, looking at what this means of being a human, what our responsibility is of, with progress, what it means to be equal, what it means to strive towards equality, is the only way to kind of, I'm very hopeful, if that makes sense. Hopeful of sexism, hopeful of racism, hopeful of that all of these things will change, basically.
Well said. I think the German example is the German example is really interesting. And yeah, you made like quite a few interesting points there. Have you, by any chance, come across a book that came out recently called Humankind: A Hopeful History?
No.
So there's this really, really cool book that's just kind of been published this year by a Dutch author called Rutger something or other, Rutger Bregman. And it's really interesting because he basically presents this, he's trying to present an argument that actually humans aren't barbaric, evil people under the surface, and that actually there's a lot of positive examples of humans coming together and showing love in history. And interestingly, what you were kind of talking about, that kind of the xenophobic thing in humans, he actually attributes it in part to some of the friendly nature of humanity and how we do collectivize in groups. It's actually in some ways a weird side effect of being so friendly with your immediate people, right? So you can feel threatened by others.
I think what's really interesting is that, if you look at examples of people who have very fixed views on certain things, like all women are da 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 da, or like they have a judgment on a sex or a race or a culture or a religion. Then they meet someone and they get to know them who believes or is of that thing that they have the judgment on. It would take that one person possibly to change their mind, because they develop a personal relationship with that exact fear or that exact judgment, which ultimately can completely dispel that belief system. So it's basically like a fear of the unknown almost. I mean, it's a combination. I feel like there's a sense of despair and a sense of hope that, and it's not that like men have run the world for so long, but you know, even just, I watched this movie 2 nights ago, that was the one that won the Oscars. What was it called? Bombshell. It won some Oscars last year, and it's about the female Fox news anchors suing Roger Ailes, who was one of the first. It was one of the first cases of Me Too, basically, in American media. And kind of watching that and looking at the web of ambition, power, shame, and the kind of normalcy that came around it. It's amazing how complicated something that people think in their mind is so simple. You know, like sexual assault is so complicated because it involves so many layers of manipulation and power and control. And it's also like hanging on someone's ambition, their career, their money, their finances, their family would be, you know, there's so many different things that kind of come into this. And when you think about, you know, the way that it's put forward, you know, why don't people talk about it sooner? You know, it can't possibly be true, or whatever it is. There's just so many cases, obviously, of it, and more kind of coming to attention. And I guess that in itself makes me feel somewhat dismayed, because it's the abuse of power that's happened for so long that again ties into the same prejudice and the same attitude that we're talking about, a sense of superiority, a sense of holding on to the reins, a sense of ownership and power and subjugation of others. And I think that ultimately it's a consciousness that trickles through many parts of society, but is dominated by not that many people, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like the popular, like the people who rise to the very top and become very successful in hedge funds and business, and often aren't the most mentally compassionate people. We're talking about, like, you know, 1% of 10% sociopaths here, 1% of the population psychopaths, 10% sociopaths. Sociopaths are non-violent psychopaths, so basically have no capacity really for empathy or an emotional register, but often are very kind of ruthless, perfect people for business.
I mean,
I'm not saying that they're all racist, don't get me wrong, but like where power goes, it's also control and subjugation, and racism is another form of it.
And this Dutch author actually goes into that a little bit, and it's really interesting how, you know, like you're saying, these are kind of perhaps in some ways a small percentage of people, and they dominate. And he was suggesting that often this idea of human nature being bad and evil is a top-down thing. It's something because the people who have got up there have that idea of humanity, you know, they're operating from that kind of selfish place that they project it down through media and everything. And it's interesting. But yeah, lastly, what are you hopeful for out of all of this craziness we're living through right now? Are we on the verge of a paradigm shift somewhere positive?
I'd like to think that people have learned quite a lot through this experience in terms of like how better to live their lives, how much more aware we can be of the environment, how much more conscious we can be of neighbors. My experience since I got back to London has been super positive. Like I had a lock fitted on an internal door yesterday, and the guy had just come back to work this week and was like chatty, he was just so happy to be back at work, so happy to be back in the sense of purpose, not because he was like, I've had a really nice time being at home and everything, but I'm just so like buzzing to be back and like so happy. So much work has come in. We're a small business and thank you for supporting us. And just was such a nice guy. And I was like, everyone's energy is like up. Like there's this great gratitude for people who still have their jobs. And of course, with this, lots of people have lost their jobs and it's been a really tough time. But the pros might be that they've been able to spend lots of time with their family. So I don't know, like I hope that there will be better awareness of like the environment and people will maybe adopt a bit more of a conscious way of living. But I think that it's a really hard thing to call, and obviously when things go back to normal, who's to say how things will end up being. So for me personally, I'm hopeful of like, I guess I'm starting a new chapter. As of next week, my dog and I together are flying over to Germany, which will be interesting, taking her on a flight. Fuck. And I guess for me, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm letting two boys, single boys, live in my flat. What the fuck are they going to be doing?
Oh, they're nice lads. They're sensible. They're very sensible.
They are. They are.
Are we gonna get the invite out to this amazing farm one day?
Yeah, you should definitely come. I said to Dash you should. But yeah, you guys should come out 100% sometime in summer. You can swim in the lake. I don't know, weed some weeds, whatever you want to do.
Is it protected if an apocalypse kicks off? Like, you said guns and hunting is involved, so we're kind of.
Yeah, there's guns and hunting. Like you guys can go out and shoot boar. As a vegan, I can't really imagine you doing that. But you can ride some horses around if you want to.
I'd like that. That sounds fun. Cool.
Yeah, you guys definitely should. It's really nice.
Sounds amazing. Escape from city life.
You can come.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you so much for talking to me, Tess. Always interested in hearing your thoughts on stuff, and yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you. Lovely. I really enjoyed chatting. I mean, I spoke most of the time. Sorry about that.
Not at all. That's what this is for. This is what this is for, really. But yeah, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day. It is fucking hot, so
I'm gonna go outside now. Get my pale white legs in the sunshine. Fuck, they need a tan.
Get the old sun cream on. Get the old Factor 40 on.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna need to layer up. Fuck. All right. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Take care. See you later. Bye.